Hello everyone. So let's get into some comments today, shall we? I don't really have a lot in the way of other updates. My plate is now relatively clear of projects, so hopefully there'll be a few more videos and I'll be working on things at a more relaxed pace. But all I'm really working on at the moment is the Naughty Sexy Choose Your Own Adventure book, which will probably take quite some time to come out because it's in collaboration with someone else who is providing the photos and things to go with it. So yeah, that's fun and exciting and not at all awkward. Right. Comments on the 2 Russell Brand videos I did. Let's make a start. So Full Metal Dragon says, "It's not hard to pay people to make fake claims against someone for certain authorities, for them to have enough of a reason to shut someone down. All it takes is an accusation for many small-minded people to automatically see the accused as guilty regardless of facts, and quite often, even after court finds the target not guilty, it doesn't matter to the weak-minded." So there's some stuff that's true there. There have been people who have been found innocent, or at the very least not guilty, of things they've been accused of, who should then be let back in to society, because that is the way our justice system is supposed to work. But instead what we find is that they never make their way back into societal good graces, because the stain of the accusation is enough. And this is most commonly found around sexual misconduct allegations, allegations of isms and phobias, and so on as well. It seems to be an ever-widening array of things that even the mere suspicion of makes you untouchable. That's not particularly healthy. I mean, there are guilty people who will be found innocent, there are innocent people who will be found guilty, but if we're not paying any attention to the processes that we use to decide who is guilty or innocent, then the court stuff is academic, particularly if you're an entertainer or a public figure and so on. That said, I think this is too conspiratorial a way to think about what is going on with Brand. We have 3 separate news organizations with all the people, editors, researchers, reporters, all involved there. We have a rape crisis center in a different country entirely, and all the people that were working there. We have historically dated diary entries, therapy notes, things like that, all of which corroborate the story. He hasn't been found guilty in a court of law, but there's definitely a case to answer, and the preponderance of evidence in this case is that he's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy. So I understand the instinct people have to kick back against this, because there have been quite a few high-profile examples of false allegations and things being ginned up and so on. But I think it's hard to justify that paranoia in the case of Brand. Justin Thor says, "You do live in a country where a young woman received a 2-year prison sentence for the high crime of, in memorial to a dead friend, posting lyrics to his favourite song on Facebook. That song was by Snoop Dogg, and she was of the indigenous race of Britain." Okay, that's slightly badly grammatically constructed, but okay, let's break this down. I think this is a half-remembered incident. So there was a young autistic woman. I did look this up earlier, just to double-check I was right on this. She posted lyrics to a song by someone called Snap Dogg, not Snoop Dogg, which did include the word nigger with an A, not an ER, twice. She did get in trouble for it. This was a post on Instagram. Did go to court. She was initially sentenced not to 2 years in prison, but to 2 weeks of electronic tagging and house arrest. But this was pretty much immediately overturned on appeal. So yes, it's stupid, but it's not as stupid as you're representing here, and you've got several of the facts wrong. None of which is to say that, yeah, free speech and free expression and ridiculous things don't happen here in the UK, like the Robin Hood Airport incident, for example. Yeah, it's just not quite as stupid as you're representing. Still stupid, though. Ajax says it took YouTube 24 hours and no criminal charges to demonetize Brand right quick, but they still run ads on his videos and they collect the money. I guess advertisers don't mind associating with Brand as long as they get some. So, yeah, on the surface that does seem hypocritical of both the advertisers and of YouTube, but the ad revenue, some of the ad revenue, if he was still monetized, would go to him. And that seems to be the point of objection for a lot of companies. I mean, the idea that there is any association, actual association between you and someone your adverts appear next to is dumb and stupid, and was the basis for the adpocalypse. But I think it's possible to understand from a brand's point of view why you might not want money that you've paid to YouTube to end up going to Brand or a white supremacist or whatever else, because then you're financially supporting someone, albeit indirectly, with views that you find repugnant. So I think it's possible to kind of understand in that instance, but I still think it's hypocritical. Rotten Recruit says, maybe I missed something, but didn't a journalist writing a hit piece on Brand contact and speak with all of his accusers and ex-flames prior to any charges being laid? Maybe the police can't go around witness grooming, but I don't think journalists are held to any standards. Events from decades ago and pre-trial by media, the water is now very muddy. I don't think there's any chance for the truth to be known either way. I think there is, because there are records from the time. You know, someone went to a rape crisis centre, got biological evidence, reported, went into therapy for years. We got the records from that. Yeah, this really isn't like a lot of cases where it just boils down to he said, she said, which isn't to say that shouldn't go to court. The journalists may have gone around various people. 2 different journalistic organisations were working on the story at the same time and then decided to join forces. So yeah, they have gone around people trying to substantiate, but there's nothing to suggest that they particularly groomed anybody or that they put these people in touch with one another, and this was all done privately behind the scenes, not publicly, as we've seen in some other incidents where I think you can make an argument that certain witness statements aren't necessarily very safe if you're making it a big public thing to start with, but this was all behind the scenes to start with. So Simo says, the BBC and Channel 4 cheered Russell on for years with his disgusting behaviour. I don't care what him and the unpleasant women he fooled around with say. It's all lies and propaganda now. I don't think that's a safe assumption. Did they cheer him on? Kinda. But, it's like, if it's an act, as it appeared to be, the joke can be at the expense of the womanizers and the disgusting people, right? You can portray a character who is a horrible womanizer, misogynist, slut, drug taker, junkie, whatever. You can portray that as a character and have those things be the target of your jokes without it being your actual real world behavior. And I think there's there was enough confusion there, but he was reprimanded several times by the BBC and other organisations. But this was 20 years ago, cultures change, and they change really rapidly these days. In fact, that's been a lot of the talk in the secondary reporting about how terrible the culture was 10, 20 years ago. Just different, I think. And culture turns over so rapidly now. It's hard to keep track of. Kev O'Reilly says, I don't like Brand. I think he's a disingenuous tosser who makes Alex Jones look like a nice bloke down the pub. Is he guilty? Honestly, I think so. He did so many hard drugs back in the noughties, there's no way he can make the categorical statements that he has. But I don't agree that his voice should be silenced. He shouldn't be demonized, demonetized, or deplatformed. If I wanted to avoid him, I'd happily do it in the same way I have for the last 20 years by not listening to him. He'll have his day in court, either criminal or civil. Until then, he's entitled to provide his view, and that shouldn't be taken away with him, nor his right to make money from his views. Yeah, that probably feels about right. And the drugs thing, I think, is important to bring up, because, you know, he was on various substances. So to what extent can we talk about diminished responsibility due to various forms of intoxication? Of course, you make the choice to an extent whether to be intoxicated or not. He did go in for treatment for drug addiction, which is genuine, and sex addiction, which isn't. At least once. You know, these are things that also need to be weighed and considered. And the fact that people can change. You know, he did reinvent himself twice. Once as a sort of, you know, I've been through all this and come out the other side kind of guru figure, and then again as an obnoxious conspiracy theorist. So he, in a meaningful way, he's no longer the same man he was 20 years ago. He's no longer the same man he was 10 years ago. To what extent is the Russell Brand now the same as the Russell Brand that did these things? And how concerning is what he does now? It has this behaviour stopped? Yeah, these are all pertinent questions, or should be pertinent questions, but aren't. Again, not that I want to run cover for him. If he did bad things, he should, you know, do penance for them. So we'll see. Dane Minton says, it creeped in long before Russell Brand, the privatisation of censorship. Yeah, I feel like I've been beating this drum for years now, and I emphasised the way that governments are acting through private institutions in my videos on this, because that kind of works as a way to wake people up to how insidious this is. Because a lot of people will excuse private censorship. You know, oh, it's their company, they can do whatever they want. It's their social media platform, they can do whatever they want. I disagree with that, because free speech, free expression is a fundamental human right that doesn't go away just because, you know, a private organisation is involved. But behind the scenes, you know, the fact is that governments for a very long time have been using extrajudicial means that do not contradict constitutions and agreements and so on, to pressure private bodies into doing censorship for them, because they know they'll never be able to pass it. So I don't think private censorship is particularly excusable either, though I think there is more leeway there. But the fact is that it's been hybridized censorship for a very long time. R. Larkinson says, I saw that letter. That was the one from the parliamentary committee that went around. That was from a Conservative MP, by the way. What came to mind was not anything to do with Russell Brand, but what if that was done to ordinary persons like you and me for supposedly being a cultural threat to the government? Scary shit. Yeah, this is what people don't grasp about cancellation as well. When it happens to a big public figure, they often still have a platform. They might lose work or whatever, but you know, they'll get by. When it happens to a normal person, yeah, it's life devastating, and they may never dig their way out of that hole, and we probably never hear from them again. So yeah, that's concerning. But I mean, so the UK government has been trying to exert control and censorship and create age gating for the internet since David Cameron was in office, and they've failed consistently to get anything like that legislation through. But they have now got that through with the online safety bill finally. So we're kind of screwed, to be honest. I guess we'll see how it shakes out, but I wouldn't expect the almost certainly incoming Labour government in a year or two to do anything about it, unfortunately. Because a lot of people want censorship and control. Ajax Plunkett says, with 6.5 million subscribers, questioning mainstream journalism, Big Pharma, the government and the war, you knew they'd take him down. Looks and feels a bit shady. I understand the appeal of just kind of instantly knee-jerking, oh, he's being attacked, same as person X, Y, and Z, we should defend him, you know, and it must be because of his views. Well, many of his views are extremely dumb or extremely dangerous, and I mean in terms of actually leading to people dying, you know. I don't know that that necessarily has anything to do with it. It might be part of the reason for going after him, that he's retained this profile and has become this dangerous anti-vax nut job. But yeah, it looks and feels a bit shady, and it only ends up justifying the way in which paranoics look at it. But again, you have to look at the evidence here. You should have his day in court, but he certainly seems to be guilty, and there's not as much reason to be suspicious as there has been in other cases. Paul Berry said, yeah, this only fuels the tinfoil/conspiracy crowd. It will only martyr him. And, you know, as we can see from some of these comments, that certainly seems to be true. Pulp Herb says, one correction, Jim. In the US, there is a lot of case law that such back-channel censorship via private bodies is a First Amendment violation. It's a big case on social media companies doing censorship for the current administration moving through the courts. The hard part is proving it. And there were incidents with previous administrations of both parties in the US as well. Yeah, the hard part is proving it and showing that it's not allowed, because in the end it is the private institution doing it. So a lot will depend on how the courts choose to interpret that. And a lot of Americans seem to, paradoxically, it's because you have the First Amendment that a lot of people think private companies are completely free to censor people without any concern. Americans tend to view free expression and free speech as a legal issue rather than an ethical or moral issue, and I think that causes problems in the States. We'll see how it goes, but I wouldn't hold my breath. Mad King Stowe says, what worries me most is how organisations and individuals punish someone based entirely off accusations. The fact that YouTube, Netflix, BBC and his agents all turned on brand purely based on allegations sets a very dangerous precedent. It teaches extremists that they can silence, defund and destroy someone they dislike just by creating a narrative. When corporations are quick to take action against individuals, I think it only validates those who believe there's a grand collaborative conspiracy. I never liked Zack Smith, but I noticed you can still have posts on some RPG forums and subreddits removed just for mentioning products he was involved in, even though, to my knowledge, he was never actually convicted or proven to have done the things he was accused of. I find that astonishing and concerning. Yeah. I don't see a lot to disagree with there. Though I would say that the brand thing, it's not a precedent, the brand thing, rather he's a victim of preceding precedents. And he's an extremist, so it's extremists silencing defunding and destroying each other. The thing with Zach, yeah, as far as I'm aware, there aren't even any charges that have ever been brought against him, and the few legal tests that he's had, he's won most of them. He's an obnoxious prick, but that's not illegal. You can't take away people's right to be dickheads. but yeah, it's not right that people are removed merely on the basis of accusations. Though I am minded of the Mercedes Carrera issues, right? That is a entirely legal system operation, but she is still languishing in a local jail years after initially being arrested. And the accusations are pretty serious. I'm probably going to get demonetized anyway on this video, so you know, she is accused of child molestation and potentially child pornography. There doesn't seem to be anything really supporting that accusation, but in that case, it's such a serious accusation. You know, what do you do? Do you keep potentially dangerous people of that type in prison or in jail indefinitely, so it would seem, awaiting trial, or do you let them out with the potential that they might offend while waiting for trial? That throws a lot of this stuff into sharp relief, I think. I'm not saying that Brand's done particularly anything as egregious as that recently, but you know, what do you do? Do you let a potential serial killer out on bail or not? What do you do here? Does the type of accusation make a difference or not? Yeah, that's the interesting issue with that, I think. Rotten and Recruiting says, interesting, I wonder if Brand's Teflon is the same as Trump's, because I made that comparison. From the outside, it looks like no one actually cares what Trump does. They know he's dodgy as fuck. Whereas Brand is the reformed sinner. I mean, yeah, that is a difference, but I think there are other valid comparisons between the two as well. So we don't have Brand necessarily confessing to crimes in the same way that Trump has. You know, he's been recorded confessing various naughty things that he's been up to. But in both cases, there is, you know, actual evidence that is accessible to the public that both of them have done crappy things. And yet, to their hardcore base, in both cases, that doesn't seem to make any difference. They will disbelieve anything they want to in order to exonerate dear leader, whichever one it might be. That's interesting. Bernaf says, the Bill Hicks to Alex Jones trajectory reminds me of the plot of 1998's Velvet Goldmine. As for Brand, I would respectively draw attention to the idea that accusations can themselves be evidence when placed in context. The James Dean pylon in the adult film industry was a good example of this. Stoyer comes out with an outcry about Dean's behaviour, previous to which he's viewed as being a step above the average woodsman. Almost immediately, several other adult actresses with little or no personal connections with one another came forward with their own stories of similar behaviour from Dean. The lack of personal connections between the women who made outcries was really the evidence against there being a conspiracy against Dean, that in turn acted as social evidence that the accusations could possibly be true. That event did a lot to shape my future perspectives on similar events in the future. Yes, there were a few actresses who initially spoke up to defend Dean's behaviour and reputation. As far as I know, the endorsements were later withdrawn. I personally view withdrawal of endorsements as being neutral rather than evidence of misbehaviour, because a successful conspiracy usually has enough powerful members to compel people to withdraw endorsements, even if they aren't themselves socially powerful. Okay. I don't know what's true about Dean, but let me present a plausible alternative hypothesis. Alright, so the accusations against Dean were quite public. so they were available for other people to see. And there is a certain amount of social cachet that comes with being a victim, and a certain amount of exposure in a very competitive industry that would come from being involved in a controversy. So in Brand's case, the investigations and so on were done behind the scenes. It wasn't done publicly. There wasn't a public accusation and then people piled on, which is the difference here. There is a phenomenon where people will copycat. They will join in with accusations. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying it's an observed and known phenomenon. So a lot of accusations isn't really evidence in and of itself. You would need corroborating hard evidence to go along with that. Yeah, there might be cases of mistaken identity, there might be cases of people making it up, there might be cases of people trying to get that social currency from getting involved. And yeah, people did come out to say otherwise about him, and he did have that positive reputation beforehand. Yeah, it's all questionable. As far as I'm aware, he's still working. But what does that say? Did anything ever go to court? I'm not sure whether it did. Yeah. So I mean, I understand why that changed your perspective, but with my Vulcan head on, I look at that and that doesn't seem cut and dried to me at all because of the way it was. But the issue with Brand is very different in that it wasn't done publicly. GM Randolfo says, sound points, but I'm not sure about your stance. On the one hand, you say that people are innocent until proven guilty. On the other, you lament that Trump and Brand are people who use their innocence to their advantage. If somebody denies the charges and is then found innocent, why shouldn't they use "I told you so" for their own aggrandizement? The appeal that Trump holds is exactly that he hasn't been convicted. With Mr. Brand, as far as I know, charges haven't even been laid yet, so we have very little information about what crimes exactly he allegedly committed. Are you trying to have it both ways? Kind of. So it's not that people are innocent until proven guilty, it's that people are considered innocent until proven guilty. In both cases here, we have a preponderance of evidence available to the public that they are guilty. The unconnected but similar accusations against Brand, the records, the physical evidence, and so on. And in the case of Trump, we have Trump on tape multiple times going, "Hello, I'm the crimes man. I did the crimes. Here are the crimes I did. Here's a crime I'm doing right now." So, it's yes, technically they're considered innocent until proven guilty, but I think in both cases, and most especially with Trump, you can look at him and go, yeah, you're guilty. The rest is a formality. Less so with Brand, but but we do these things in the way that we do them for a reason. So we should let the justice system play out, and we should consider them innocent until they're proven guilty. Alright, switching gears. I reviewed the Transformers RPG this week. Lord Charles says, for the target demographic, just based on the art, they're going to likely be aiming for either that 8 to 13 year old that has moved on from whatever the current show is and is collecting what is on the shelves, which beyond merchandising tie-in for movies and TV shows is a consistent line called Generations. This is also the line that has a decent appeal with many adult collectors due to it having pretty much every character you can think of in it, with a very consistent but G1 styled aesthetic. So that's kind of what I was saying in the review, that I think this is nostalgia bait for older fans of Transformers, because, you know, we never grow up. But that's an interesting way to look at the sort of 8 to 13 demographics. So kids graduating from the films and the more modern series and becoming collectors and becoming interested in the wider, the more interesting aspects of Transformers. See, I'm not a collector. I'm a collector of RPGs. I'm not a collector of toys, and no judgment. So I wasn't particularly aware of Generations, and so it goes for other kind of collector versions of childhood toys. If you want to hear more about that, I think Mr. Ryan David from Nerdcognito is more of a toy collector, so he might be someone to talk to. Dirk van der Reken says, hugely disappointed that these are level-based systems with explosive stats. Yeah, I agree, but I want to keep my powder dry until a later comment to talk about that more. JP Got Rockets says, I have asked the same question as you did at 3 minutes 41 seconds. The conclusion is that licensing is more lucrative for Hasbro and removes overhead and risk, mitigating any possible losses that developing the product at WotC might. Renegade is also producing some of the old Avalon Hill products as well, which all seems somehow disingenuous, as Hasbro WotC went out of their way to purchase Avalon Hill, as well as moving products such as Axis and Allies and Samurai Swords, renamed to something else after the MB acquisition, to Avalon Hill after buying Milton Bradley. Hasbro has the biggest well-known name in gaming under its umbrella, and it refuses to put that horse to work. Then has the absolute temerity to somehow whine about WotC being under-monetized instead of expanding their reach with more games and putting more out into the market. They've decided it's better to sell brand licenses so that someone can sell a D&D waffle iron. Yeah. It still doesn't particularly make sense to me. I guess they think they shouldn't be competing with themselves, but then why license out IPs to create competing products in any case? It's lower risk, but if you're worried about internal competition, then that doesn't make any sense either. And they've shown that they're willing to do these product tie-ins with Magic the Gathering, so why not do it with D&D? Plenty of people make games based on the 5th edition D&D engine, which are wildly inappropriate, and a lot of these, well, all of these games put out by Renegade, they are class level systems that have broad similarities with D&D anyway, and they're not particularly great systems because of it. So I don't know, none of it makes sense. With the WotC name behind these games, I think they would sell a lot better. And, you know, everyone in the industry knows it's core books where you make the most money. So having multiple game lines selling core books would, in theory, make them more money. I don't get it. I don't really understand. Aaron the Relentless says, maybe I'm cynical, but this game and its predecessors seem empty and soulless. The art isn't super bad, but the layout looks like baby's first RPG with 2 columns and huge swathes of empty white. The art seems too simple at first glance. Maybe the camera doesn't do it justice. Looking at the system, well, in G.I. Joe, and I was immediately struck by how they seemingly didn't do the thing I expected out of the game. Make a game where it's less than half game. Really, that should be a simple military mission/skirmish generator worked into a full game, almost like D&D 4e, but far more simple. More than half roster book for established characters. I'm an RPG player, and the cartoon was my childhood. I owned nearly all the figures, and nearly half of them still had their codpiece. People who had the figures will get that joke. If I was going to buy one of these games, it would have been G.I. Joe, but the decisions made in the book seemingly weren't made by a fan of the figures, the obvious translation of which would be stat blocks. let's see if Shipwreck and Snowjob can take on Storm Shadow. That's how an RPG enthusiast who loved the action figures would approach building that system at an absolute baseline, to play with the toys, as it were. As is, it doesn't look like a fan of one medium and or the other designed that game. It's like it was designed to look like an RPG about a property and do what it does, but with zero humanity in the equation. I said all that to say, same goes here, having full write-ups of villains but not heroes, and even then having a full page of art, and you don't even showcase all the various forms of each villain in the art, in Transformers, smells very wrong, like a fan didn't write this, same as the G.I. Joe game. I wasn't big on Transformers, but it's in the name. Art that showcases action in the different forms and their transition is going to be where it's at. I didn't see a whole lot of that in the video. I thought that was an insightful comment, so I read the whole thing. The art is pretty good, I would say. Yeah, it doesn't showcase the transitions so much, but I was just so happy to see some colour, and bright colour at that. You know, something engaging and bright. That made me happy. The layout, I mean, it's simple, but I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that. It's got a few flourishes. I guess it could be a little bit less empty, maybe. And yeah, it's a system that will do the job, but doesn't really fit any of the particular properties that it has been attached to, and class level never felt relevant. I agree with you that these games should be more roster books. So when I was... Apologies for selling my own stuff, but it is my channel. When I was putting together Agents of Swing, I was looking at all the Spy-Fi serials of the 60s and 70s. And I felt like a lot of people would want to take those characters that they knew from those old serials and mix and match them and put them up against villains. And so I created a huge roster of knockoff versions of all of these different characters, whether Steed, Emma Peel, James Bond, you know, whoever. They've got a lot more obscure ones as well. With the idea being that you could introduce these into your game, or if you just wanted to pick up and play, you could grab a couple of characters that you kind of knew, and then away you went. Right, and that would be an in for a lot of people. And a game for a lot of people who bought the game ended up being identifying all the knockoff characters as best they could. And yeah, this is something that I felt was missing from this book and the G.I. Joe book, but then they're going to be looking to sell you supplements wherein they might sell a catalogue of all the characters. I have risked another purchase in the G.I. Joe line because I liked Action Force when I was a kid. So they've done a Cobra book. So I've bought the Cobra book, which is probably about playing Cobra characters. But I'm kind of hoping that it's got a bit of a roster in there. If it doesn't, I probably won't indulge in these game lines anymore, because I could just make up my own stuff. But we'll see, and I'll let you know when I get it and review it, obviously. But yeah, I think you're bang on there. People are curious more about the actual characters from the series and the toy lines and so on, more than they are in making up their own characters with these properties, I think. Lexan Rapier says, it sounds like it's just going to be hugely swingy, talking about the dice mechanic. In theory, it gives you a target curve of averages, with D2 plus D20 giving around 12, and D12 plus D20 giving around 17. The problem with that is that the D20 can beat the target number averages already, and if you move away from the averages, the second dice is just too big as well. I think the issue might be the D20. I concur. One way to kind of fix that with a few more tweaks would be to roll 3 dice, so 2d10 plus the extra dice. Now 3 dice gives you a bell curve instead of a bell spike, but for heroic games that may be a little bit meh, because it clusters around the average. I mean, it can make competent characters reliably competent, which is good. It's more realistic in some senses, which is good, but it reduces the dramatic swings that you get in, heroic fiction. So a way around that is to use the D20 for high stress situations and the 2D10 for low stress situations. Right, this week I saved the Kalergi plan responses for last, so let's have a look. Because some of them weren't just abuse. Fractured Visions says, can someone please explain to me the importance of supposed European culture? The culture of Europe 300 years ago was nothing like it is today, nor will it be in 200 years' time. Europe is evolving. Yeah, the only constant anywhere is change, and Europe doesn't have a culture. It has many cultures, all brought together. There is no white culture, there is no black culture, there is no brown culture, there is no yellow culture. There are many cultures. Some of them may share similarities, others don't. This idea of race as culture is just complete abject nonsense. Doc Ninini says, to all the white people crying in the comments, have more kids then, stop being a victim. Yeah, but would you fuck any of them? It's a good question. I mean, I might stoop to some of these white supremacist women, but it would be a hate fuck. Imond says, this scum literally has the Baphomet on his hat. He is nothing but a deceiver. The reason I smuggle occult imagery and so on into many of my videos is to flush out idiots, and lo, it has worked. I am an atheist and a skeptic. I do not believe in any of this nonsense. Joanne Chisholm says, have you been to Lapedusa like in the last few days, mate? This seems to be the latest cause célèbre amongst the far right. We touched on that last week. I think there is an Italian island that has been inundated with a large number of immigrants coming over. More than doubling the population of the island, so they would have you believe. But they're not settling there. It's just that due to a confluence of events, weather and so on, that a lot of people attempting to get to Europe ended up arriving at the same place. Right? And it happened to be more people than actually live on that island. So the island has mobilized to take them in and take care of them until they can be properly processed and moved on elsewhere. So it's not as being presented, and it's not a new normal. It is an exceptional set of circumstances, and it's made zero demographic change to the island. Chonorona says, search Kalergi, get this wank stain, YouTube censorship. You searched for Kalergi, you got a Kalergi video. That's not... just because you disagree with it. And if you're looking it up, shouldn't you be looking for something to inform you, which this video does, rather than something that just merely confirms your prejudices? So this would seem to be a rare incidence of YouTube working as intended, or at least as expected. Oberoth says, the drugs have fried your brain. I'm not one for recreational drugs, really. I'm too much of a control freak for that. The only drugs I take are the ones prescribed to me. I have experimented in the past, but I don't think I've done anything more than once. So no, it's not the drugs, it's it's that I have a brain to be fried, rather than an empty hole filled with hatred. Get Out of America, which is ironic because obviously I'm European, says Togaf Tutum, which of course is mutt faggot backwards, and the far right obsession with their entirely imagined incidents of me being mixed race continues. I have been mistaken for everything, but I am British, and we British are all proud mutts in any case. Zang. Sup. I'm reliably informed that I'm terrible at pimping my stuff, so here I am, pimping my stuff. You can buy most of that shit that I make over at post-mort.com. Hope to see you there.
What happened today? See, I don't like the, I have, okay, like a lot of you, I hate a lot, you know? But I hate with style and creativity.